We good? We're live? Episode 8.
Welcome to episode 8 of the
Welcome,
podcast.
everyone.
Yeah.
Semifinals tour is done.
Yes, last 3 weeks has been
We
a
made
roller.
it out alive.
We're still standing.
We're still standing.
We're seated. But it was, I mean, like every year, regardless of flawless or not, like it's always a roller coaster of emotions back there. So I think it's be a great episode to talk about semifinals
Yep.
in whole,
Yep.
and then we can talk about what's next and go from there. What do you think?
Yeah. Week 1 was... We didn't have a lot going on week 1. Jarrett went out to French Throwdown,
Yep.
which, from what I'm hearing, was one of the better events all year, and it looked like it.
It looked
'cause
like it for
their
sure.
crowd was awesome. Lucy was there, and I think she had kind of the performance that... I don't know if we expected one way or the other because she's so new with us, and obviously being 17 years old, you never know what's going to happen there, but I think she got a lot of good experience out of it, which was one. Is there anything that you took away working with her the last couple months going into it and now seeing her perform?
Yeah, so we've only got to hang out with her the one time this year,
Mm-hmm.
and then obviously a lot of it's just been correspondence through text or a phone call or Zoom calls. But just the maturity of her, right? Like to be that young and show a long-term growth plan into the sport, right? Normally people want to be a flash in the pan. They want to see results instantly so they can be hyper competitive from day one. I mean, that's great, obviously, right? But to see someone more composed and understanding, like, hey, like this isn't a 1 year, 2 year plan for me. Like I want to be established in this for a long time, and that's credit to Jarrett too. I'm sure he's had many conversations and paving that path for her throughout this process too. But in terms of Europe, I thought what was really exciting about that, right? Like it kicked off the weekend, and so many phenomenal athletes there. So it gave us a lot of data points, but more so just it was awesome to see CrossFit of how we've seen it probably years prior, and enjoy those races that we've seen in past years. Again, like as a fan of the sport, I love to see the battles there and see the new faces or new names come through the ranks and then really like stamp their authority quite early on, and then you see the veteran people just chip away at them and then just show their experience by the end of the weekend.
Yep. And then we saw obviously a lot of good games athletes in Europe. I know you are probably looking pretty closely at Gabby and Laura there. What do you think about those performances? Like obviously Tia is going to be going against them in a couple months. Obviously the scores were close. Like we had a lot of good times that were both comparable to week 3 and then week 1. I know the run course gets a little iffy, whatever that looks like, but what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think they did a phenomenal job, right? I think they did what they had to do. It was awesome for them to show the world what they're capable of. I think, yeah, you're right. Like it's really hard to like compare region to region, just with the nuances of if someone has to travel 6 foot longer than they have to on the legless rope climb workout over 7 rounds, that can eventuate to be a lot of time. The run, obviously, a lot of discrepancy there in the distances. It's one of those things too. It's like at least there's some form of comparability against the workouts in that, but I'm sure that everyone who's closely or who's been involved in the sport for a long time, it's not apples to apples, right? Like we understand that this is, as much as a test could be as close as they can be, and I know as much as social media and us love to data pick and look at all that, it's not the same. I think the only way you can compare it is if they're lined up against each other there.
Yeah, and shout out Mike Halpin for all the data, by the way. Shout out to you.
But I did like it. I liked watching both the women and men for sure. Like I really enjoyed watching the men's field. So much back and forth going through their leadership, through the leaders. I really liked Sunday. Really gave us a really eventful, packed fan experience for the last 3 events. The last 3 events on the final day. I will say though, it is enjoyable as coaches as well, because it allows you to roll into the weekend, just building momentum throughout the whole entire semifinals weekend. You know, starting with one event, cool, it's done and dusted. You can go home, prep, or do whatever you need to do, or walk willow, or whatever it may be. And the next day, you start with another early brief, which is probably the only I wish we didn't have to do this. But then you get 2 workouts.
Yep.
And then the weekend really kicks off. And as we can see as well, the test, basically, they just got shorter as the weekend went, right?
Yep.
We started with our longest workout, 25 or 20 minutes plus. Then we went down to about that mid-teens.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just got shorter and shorter as the weekend went on. So that was interesting. But we all knew that prior to even week 1 starting that this was going to be the case.
Yeah, I think that was something that was the biggest change for us, right? Because we talked about programming in the last podcast quite a bit, and I think we liked it overall. There's a lot of fitness involved, but to see the difference of mindset of people coming in each day seemed different this year, because you're halfway through the competition going into the final day, where I was talking to a lot of people this weekend, and usually Sunday is the leaderboard's pretty much already where it's going to be. You may see a couple people move a little bit, but it's usually shaken up.
Yeah.
But like this year, it looked completely different from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. because there were so many points on the board in that last day. And if you have a bad event in 1 and 2, people may count you out, to where we even saw, obviously, Caroline and Chloe, they just had full swings all the way back in. But then there were also people that were in the top 5 that didn't even make it. So I think that was interesting. I think mentally that was a big one for people, because we got to see how tough people were going into the final day. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. And then from there, what did we do? So week 2, we had West Coast, which was good. And obviously Torian was an absolute blast. I got to go out there, which was cool, first time. You guys have always told me how fun that event is, and it lived up to the hype, because that was a different experience for sure.
Yeah, Mike and John do a great job down there at the Torian Pro, so it's awesome to see that event get the credit it deserves, right? Like it's so isolated, so far away from everybody. So to see the impact that it is having on CrossFit as a whole, or the semifinals, it's awesome to see. But yeah, I think that was a mixed bag, obviously, from our performance and that, but like so many great takeaways throughout the weekends. I think some of the standout points, at least from the Torian guys, because I work closer with those two, it's exactly what we wanted to see from them. The margins with only top 4 going doesn't leave much room for error.
Yep.
So it's very critical that they obviously showcase to the best of their ability and take smaller risks, so to speak. But that's something that we spoke to with Maddie. It's like, especially with her excellent performance of winning 4 events down there. But most importantly for me is watching the Snatch event and seeing her execute that and beat her training time by minutes.
Well, and people don't know that's her max, that last bar, and she only hit it, 4 or 5 weeks ago for really the first time in a while, then she hit it multiple times since then, and I think she did great on the floor. I mean, she was probably 2 misses away from being a really good scorer on that workout, and she took some risks, and that's what happens. And I think semifinals is what that's for. I think Jay did the same thing on a few things. So, and to watch those 3 guys was probably the best race I've ever seen at a regional styles event. I think we got spoiled in that week, and then also this week at Syndicate with those guys. But I mean, Ricky, Jay, and Bailey can all be top 10 at the games. Like after the performances we saw, those guys are going to battle in August as well.
Yeah, I think that was awesome to see from the men's side anyway, to see those 3 exchange blows, right? Like we could see the leadership or the leader role changing actually throughout the whole entire weekend. Like we had Ricky start off, then we saw Jay in the lead, and then we saw Bailey take it there for a minute and tied. And then, it just went down and Ricky walked away with it, which was awesome to see the high level caliber of athletes starting to produce there. And Pete Ellis taking that 4th spot too was phenomenal.
We got to know him at Down Under a little bit, and just like to see the amount of energy that kid has and fight that he has was cool to see. And we had some good conversations with him, and he was just one of those guys you could tell passionate. Like that was the biggest thing, and that bleeds into his training that we've heard. And then we had 2 rookies on the women's side as well, so it was good to kind of see what they did. We didn't know much about them, but now to see Oceana get some extra spots, I know you guys are happy about that, and they've been fighting for those, so that's cool. And then week 3, we went over to...
Also, we had Colton and Olivia.
Oh, yeah. So West Coast, my bad, which was a crazy week.
Yeah, I think probably that one had the most external factors to be considered, or asterisks next to the whole event there. In terms of like data points, we saw that the run got changed at the last minute, which is fine. They made the adequate change.
Did you think that was good? Do you think? based on what people clocked on their distances.
So, see, I don't mind whatever the event organizers want to do, as long as the track's consistent and there's quite a very understanding that, hey, this isn't comparable to another region.
Yep.
That's probably the only thing where I wish, or I would have hoped that it would be very similar to the other regions. But in terms of like bringing back the berm and that whole run, I think that's pretty monumental in the sport of CrossFit. And I think many of them athletes would have loved to have run that, just to say, like, feel, or, you know, go down memory lane, so to speak, in that. And they had stairs too, which is another element in that. And I think we saw that play more in impact of the teams, where they could just like slow down the transition in the stairs, because you can't really overtake that if you're just two people wide. And then the heat was another element throughout that whole weekend. And their warm-up area and their competing were all sort of exposed to the outside environment. Sure, it was 70 degrees Fahrenheit. However, just consistently being outside. And I recall in that tennis arena that there isn't a good airflow in there sometimes if there isn't a breeze in the afternoon. So some of those factors for sure will play a toll in performance. But nonetheless, like, that was some great blows there too with the men and the females. I don't think it was solidified up until the end, right? So like, they're the cool races that, you know, we've come to love.
Yeah, I think their top, I mean, call it a podium or whatever you want to call it, they dropped and they went in and out quite a bit. Like, even with Pat leading and then the snatch happening and all those things, that was a pretty cool race. I think the biggest takeaway for me on the men's side was just how deep it's getting. Like, Colton, I mean, you win 2 events, and obviously Olivia won 2 events as well. But
and the gentleman in Europe won 2 events. The first two.
Oldest. Yeah, absolutely. So there was 3 people of maybe, I don't think anybody else, but there was 3 people who won multiple events, and they didn't even qualify for the games. So that's insane.
And that could be too, like, the scoring system now has changed from previous years, right? So like, it's now 3 points different all the way down, rather than the 5s and the 4s.
And we even saw it this week, to where we were talking about it, even just adding another spot or a couple spots dramatically changes those things, because we were like doing the math on scores with Olivia and Colton being in the East rather than the West, and I think 8 spots or whatever it was, 8 and 9 spots was tight, and that maybe that's the reason. I don't know. I think this system is still working the bugs out, but hopefully we'll get a way to get the fittest people at the games, because I truly believe Olivia and Colton are in that boat. Obviously, you got to show up on game day, and that's a tough blow for them, because they have worked just as hard as anybody to be there, and it's just sport at the end of the day. The good thing with them, we've talked to them 100 times by now, and both of them are training harder than they ever have at the things that they know they need to get better at. So I think when we talk to our athletes, and we've talked on these things before, you got 2 options when those things happen, right? You can dive in deeper, or you can pull back a little bit, and I think we know what will happen with those 2.
Yeah, for sure. But it was cool to see Johnston.
He crushed. Crushed
it again. Yeah, I think he did. I think he did Justin things again. He didn't win one, but won the overall. So it's really cool to see that. But that just goes to show exactly what you're saying, like the depth of the field, where you know, nothing's guaranteed to the end, because there's so many high caliber athletes competing throughout that. You know, to see the shake up from the snatch workout and even the final workout, right? Like, that was such a sitting on the edge of your seat, so to speak, on your final event, and then that shook the leaderboard pretty hard too. And I think in all regions, that final event did some damage. Either positive or negative, depending on the athlete, just on the overall.
It felt a little bit like that 2016 sandbag workout. So it was echo bike, burpee box jump over, and then sandbag cleans to finish. That was just a pure sprint, and you had to ride the lightning a little bit, and if you blew up, you blew up, which was cool to see the end of comp that way. I was telling Olivia, that was when I was in Australia, so I was waking up really early to watch those and screaming in the room and waking people up, which was cool. But it felt good to have exciting events again, because I think last year with the gymnastics and more of the fine-tuned, nuanced movements that we had, it wasn't as much of a racing and really going after people. It was more of like holding your breath and hoping nothing bad happens. So I was happy to see that. Like, that felt a lot better, at least from a viewing standpoint. And I'd have to go back and look, but I'd like to check the views on what the live streams look like, to kind of go week by week as like more
engagement or more
and like more excitement, right? Because you're hearing about more stories and more storylines. I think people were kind of, I don't know if they're just kind of sick of what things are happening in CrossFit for a while, coming into the changes back and forth. But I think the hype grew as the weekends went, so it'd be cool to go back and look at the data on that.
Yeah, I think collectively from the feedback that we've seen or read or watched, there's a lot of positivity towards the programming, and they found the right people, so to speak. Like it's always tough on the fringe athletes where they're just short of hitting that milestone of what they're trying to achieve, and it's always tough for sure, and I feel for those guys. But we'll talk more about like our view of it all. I think we're on to week 3 now.
Yeah, Syndicate, and then we also had Callie on down in Latin America going against Guy, which was cool. That was a good battle for sure. I mean, good to see Guy back at it. Like, he's looked great all weekend. He kind of looked like his old self, which was cool, especially because we had a guy going against him. Callion did a really good job. I know he knows he had some holes in a couple things, which we've been working on with Batu, which has been great. He's gotten better at all of them, and to just have him win a couple events was awesome, because I don't know if he won any last year when he qualified, but definitely growth there. That brings us to a cool point, like we talked about yesterday, 18 event wins.
Yeah, 18 event wins across all semifinals.
For all of our proven athletes.
Yeah, so that's something remarkable there in itself there. Yeah.
And then we'll go into Tia. Because, like, obviously with them being – it's always fun to have one in Knoxville, because obviously we get to just drive down the road. We get to know the lay of the land. I think Syndicate did an amazing job. Wilson and his team were kind of on all weekend. The volunteers did a great job. I think there was more fans there than I expected, and more that were definitely there than the last couple years.
For sure.
And I think it went great. But what'd you think?
Yeah, this was the first semifinals that I got to go to this year, but I thought it was great from the reception of Wilson and the team, and then bumping into a lot of familiar faces around the camps and seeing a lot of the athletes again for a hot minute. It was awesome to see them, and it just brings back, like, when you start seeing the familiar faces, like there's a competition coming around the corner, right, and a check-in, and you're starting to feel that vibe. And at the same time, right, like, you're confident. I'm confident in Tia's preparation, but you don't know how that stacks up, right? Like, that's why there's always that. You're just like, you're confident, but what does that even like equate to or measure up to? Because that's what determines whether or not you go forward, right? So that went pretty well. And then obviously event 1 started with the 5 rounds, 800 run, and the 10 clean and jerk. So that went as planned. When we practiced this one, the same weekend Europe practiced theirs, we practiced with the transition. So we would advance the barbell. So Tia's time was very much spot on with that. So,
because these guys had, if you don't know, they had that big hill coming out. So I think that slowed them down a little bit on overall time to testing. And obviously, if you're not a great runner, that probably slowed you down even more. But I think that's, thinking back when she did it, we have a nice little ramp out there that probably played about the same. But that was cool to see. Yeah,
it went well. Like, I think, I'm just trying to think back to the conversations with Tia and I about that, or post or during that event. It went exactly how we would feel. Like, we felt like Haley would come out swinging. We know that she's a phenomenal runner. She plays to her strengths. Like, when she knows she's got a strength, she won't sleep on it. She'll utilize it to its full capacity there. She did a brilliant job. Love to see her back too, which is awesome. And then, but the paces, what we anticipated, the first round to be faster, then there'll be a slight decline and then settle into a pace. And that's natural, right? Because as soon as you start loading those hamstrings, it's just going to feel a lot slower to run, especially when you're met with a hill run. Well, it would feel like that for them immediately after putting that barbell down. So anticipated a bit of a decline in speed in that. There was always that conversation with Tia to go touch and go towards the end there of like, hey, if you feel like you've got energy, just go for it.
Yep. And she did it in training, right? So she at least knew what that would feel like.
There was conversations of opening up with a set of 5 in the first round. But depending on where you were in the run, right? Like, if everyone was running hard, and you don't want to be in that position where you have to overtake people or start, like going wider around people for those runs, maybe just open up with a small set just to break away from them in the transitional component and then settle into your run. She didn't need to do that. She was surprised how many people wanted to run really fast. I think there was a young lady who was in front of her for the first 300, and Tia's like, oh boy, like we're going to be holding this pace for a while, are we?
Yeah.
And that was awesome to see. I think you and I were around probably the 300-400 meter mark around that run track. So we got to share her some live splits in there. We never really watched. Well, I personally never watched any event until the final two events, the Snatch possibly, and
in the stands.
Yeah.
So Tia, I mean, I think it was on behind the scenes with Brandon. I talked to her about that first run, and it was really fast, like way faster than I think she anticipated, because you were clocking it as well, and she had a much slower second run. Was that the plan for you guys going into that, just to kind of set the precedent of what that would look like and try to bait some people? Or was that just like a first time back on the competition floor for the year, got some jitters, just want to set that?
It's hard because I think naturally, look at all the regions, everyone, all the feedback is from all 270 athletes.
Yeah.
I went faster than I should have.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reality. It's great to understand that, and I don't think that's going to disappear. You know what I mean? So it's going to happen. Sure, it's probably a touch faster, but that's the instincts of what these guys will always do and have done. So we anticipated that. In terms of overall time, it's really hard to compare if that's how accurate that 800 is or how much the decline or incline had an impact on that. But yeah, certainly faster than a flat 800. Yeah,
because it was they did a good job at Syndicate too, because it was a longer course, they said, and they wanted to make it a pure 800. And I think the course was great what they had. They ran through Vendor Village. A lot of people got to watch what was going on. We had a great seat going around that corner, so they did a good job on that. And then that was it for day one, which was awesome. And Caroline had an absolutely great performance on that. I think better than any of us expected. And we're starting to learn her more as an athlete of competing and how hard she competes, but she also knows herself. So that was cool to see on that one. Chloe did great as well. And then we went into event 2, which was the front squat one, which obviously that's Tia's bread and butter, which I know you were a little frustrated on the world record there.
It's not frustrated. It's just more like when we compare it to training times and then see that she went not dramatically slower, but she just pulled back the throttle a little bit. And that's the competitive edge of that's the competitive nature of hey, there's 100 points is 100 points, whether you win by 3 minutes or 10 seconds or a second, right? I think she understands that better than most. It's just, I think from a coach's perspective, it's dang, I know that we have this much more time in the bank, what we could have done. We were far from that. And I think she was disappointed to know, I didn't realize I was that far off my training time. So, that's exciting to know that she's now doesn't need to she can have that control of slowing it down or understanding the tempo. So that's all good stuff. I think it wasn't bad by any means, but just knowing that we didn't tap the full potential on that workout, it's just the reality. But in terms of execution, everything went really well. I think we watched it from above from above. What was this workout? The double under. So we could look down at the double unders. Some people opted to go on the mats.
Dahlinger mats.
Yeah, which is, I get it, the sort of transitions and stuff like that. But for us, we hadn't really practiced using that ever, or that's never been an option. So we're not going to, so to speak, start now. And for her, allowed her to sort of sit back and see the whole peripheral of the field and understand where they are. Because sometimes when you are stacked in front, you can't see them. So you're
especially on this one, because people were tripping.
Yeah.
And that made a big difference for a lot. If you could hang on for those, or if it was an intentional break, you even didn't have that mental aspect of, I've got to get going again.
Yeah, because they haven't broken. I can't hear them stopping. So those things play.
Was that talked about? Did you guys talk about that before, kind of where she would stage her rope and everything? So
for the most part, Tia has a conscious decision or conversation with me of hey, this is where I'm going to set it up. And I want her to talk or walk at me through it, because it allows her to be more conscious of the thought process of where she's going to line up or what she's going to do, and so to speak. And then it gives me good insight of oh, cool, we're on track. She said she was going to do this and she's doing that, so to speak. Yeah. She's not going off script. And that happens.
Did you see any rope malfunctions at all in 3 weeks? I was wondering about that, because everybody that we told, at least, hey, bring 2 out just in case, because bearings go and screws go and things that.
I think that's the evolution of the sport too. We're not seeing so much of that. It's my comparison's probably Formula One, 15, 20 years ago. A pit stop was a 50-50 call. Man, are we going to get out of here in 5, or are we going to get out of here in a minute? And we're not seeing so much of that now too, with like rope changes or grip reliability, or like just the nuances of the workout. So,
Yep.
you know, equipment malfunctions within like the echoes and runners and stuff like that. I think CrossFit have done a phenomenal job, or Rogue themselves have done a phenomenal job of like mitigating those risks.
Yep.
But they're still there, but you're right. So
Yeah, I was surprised I didn't see
Yeah.
any or hear of any stories there, which is great. Like, I think to your point, like RX Smart Gear has this new rope that has more of a hook on it rather than a bearing, a ball bearing in there, which helps a lot. But to go back to it, like, I think that event was something we knew she went unbroken in training, which was
the toe to bar.
Yep. And she looked awesome. And I think she made a conscious decision there for the whole weekend to kind of break on that, which may have been the difference. But like, that was the first one, I think, where people, at least what they were saying to me, obviously event one, they noticed, but like the fitness level was just different there. Like, she looked like she was as good as she's ever been on that.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I got to appreciate that. I think I was just looking too closely just on her movement patterns and mechanics and consciousness of like positioning of like how intentional she's moving the pillars or markers and stuff like that. So for sure, like I mean, obviously the like the results were great for her on that one.
So a lot of new coaches I've noticed, and like when we're at events, we see new things every year. We'll take splits and they'll do the split times to each movement and rest times and things like that. And I've noticed with you, it's more of like you just said, you're going to watch body movements. You're going to watch how she's moving through things. Is that the bigger play there when it comes to you mentally to see, hey, between now and the games, I noticed this, rather than how times stack up in certain workouts?
Yeah, like I think like times and splits and training, it's great for the athlete to know before their heat, you know what I mean? Like we had Dwight in the stands, and he was like filming everything and giving us some live splits, which is awesome. There was enough time in the corral then to provide information for your athlete. Tia doesn't typically like to know that stuff because I think it just bogs her brain of like not unnecessarily like needing information. For me, it's just more about movement, right? Like, and understanding their flow and understanding their nature of like how they want to attack this and approach this. We should have seen them, like as coaches, we should have seen how they move prior to this point, if they're in person. So for me, I've seen Tia do these workouts and I've seen her train many, many times and compete many times. So it's just making sure that she's following or going through a flow of control. And that's where I'm, because the big dance is in August, it's not now. So I want to make sure that I'm looking at those nuances to make sure that, okay, I've got some notes and these are the things that I noticed that we can brush up on, or this is great that this happens so that we can do touches on this more often. So the splits, because she knew what she needed to do, and she's a very conscious athlete of understanding where her body should be in relative to time and space, that's on her. But in terms of like the 5,000 foot view of like, hey, like your body position started changing or doing this, or so to speak, or like we backed off, you can see that now in later splits, but you can feel that on the floor. They're the things that I'm looking at and trying to make note of. At the same time, trying to absorb what all the other athletes are doing to see like, hey, there's some cool takeaways. Like someone opted to go unbroken the toe to bar. Let's see how this plays for them. Or they're consciously breaking up their double unders to then going unbroken on the toe to bar. Like all these nuances, like things that you don't get to see on the live feed.
Because you don't get the full picture.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very important that you quickly utilize that time. Well, you utilize that time to see the rest of the field.
Well, I think that was the most interesting thing because we were out with the field was without Tia obviously last year, so I think there was some women in that heat that got toyed in a little bit on the pace of how fast she went out on some things, and it maybe wasn't game plan went out the window because they didn't have to deal with that last year. There was just a brand new element to competing on that, which was interesting to see. And it'll be interesting to see kind of how that plays out in August as well, if there's kind of changes that are made there.
And I think that's a good segue because event 2 and event 3, for the women particularly, you had to like ride the red line or throttle back a little bit. You couldn't get too caught up into it, right? And I say that because exactly that, like if the earlier rounds people were going crash hot, they would fall off and decline, and then if you got caught in that race, that could happen to yourself too, particularly for those two. So then moving on to event 3, it's the same thing with that legless rope climb. Like that seems to be the more so the limiter for females, but I think collectively across all regions, I think there's only one lady that I know of that failed a rep and then couldn't keep that tempo.
Yeah, and I think it was more of, like you just said, people just crash and burning. Like, I don't think it was a legless problem. Obviously, those ropes are a little bit shorter than people's normal gym ropes just because of the nameplates. So it was good there. But, like, I think my biggest question, I saw somebody ask this somewhere else, do you think it was appropriately programmed for men and women? Like, we saw a vastly different performance and just, like, the type of output you needed from a man to a woman on that workout.
Yeah, for sure. Like, when we talk to our male athletes versus our female athletes, our male conversation, it's like, hey, it's echo paces, it's transitions, and it's like moving quick descent on the rope.
Yep.
You know, we're talking about, like, those micro milliseconds there. For the women, it's like, hey, smooth execution of the rope, you know, then be smooth on the box, smooth on the echo. You know, like, it's all smooth here, but for the men, it's like, hey, we got to push this, like, really be on red line for this, transition fast, understand what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And that's the same for the final event too. And we'll get to that. Like, you just gotta blow really hard on the echo, and then, like, hold on to those rings for 15, which should be staple for most men athletes at that point. But yeah, coming back to event 3, similar thing, right? Like to event 2, the paces went out a little fast to begin with, but then settled in quite early on. And I think that was the conversation with Tia. It's like, hey, like, I felt in control. Like, I felt like I was, like, sustaining a lead, and I just wanted to smoothly execute through that and just get through it all. And which is great. She still obviously pushed it, but it's great to see, again, that composure or that maturity of, like, understanding what's needed output-wise rather than, you know, what she wants to do. She still pushed it very hard, don't get me wrong. But I know, or I felt like she had potentially something else in her there. Yeah,
I would say around 4 and 5, we started seeing separation there to where it was kind of like the front squat. Like, you're not going to push to 100%, but there's a lot of room there.
But full credit to the other ladies. Like, there was some, like, blistering paces, and they were pushing the tempo quite early on, and it was exciting to see that. And Haley did a really good job.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, my mind's blanking on some names there, but, like, it was awesome to see those races too. You know, like, it was never sealed until it was too. To say 100%. All that, right? Like,
and then Caroline, she had another outstanding performance, because we've been working a lot on legless there, and that's one of her weaknesses. But she looked in control the whole time. Everything was to game plan. I think she stayed in her own lane. And that was one of the biggest performances for her of the weekend. Yeah,
I think she was really pleased with that, because I think she beat her training time by well over a minute. You know, and that talks more about Caroline and how training and competition are two different people there, you know, and it's awesome to see, to see her step up in competition settings. What was that? That was, and then her finish after her 10th box jump, man. Tia said she wanted to give her a hug at the finish line, but
it was just a bulldog coming down.
Caroline had her head down.
She looked like she was a 6'5" dude running down the lane.
She's like, I'm getting out of her way. It was pretty cool to see.
But that's like, to see the fire up, and I think we compare her and Colton a lot, because of, like, they both have jobs, they both work a lot. They're from very, like, strong working farm families that, like, they've been raised a certain way, and it bleeds into what they do on the competition floor. To see that payoff for them is just awesome.
Yeah.
So event 4 was a row?
Yep.
Row and handstand walk?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That went really well. Obviously, like, when you got the natures or the caliber of athletes like Haley Adams, which is phenomenal on a roller and on her hands, and then Brooke Wells, like, we've known that.
And even Danielle, obviously, with all the event wins she has in her career, we knew that was going to be somebody that would push to you, and that was good to see. And
Alexis Raptis with that early no rep there, we understand like that played into it.
Because she was still with her even after that, which was cool.
But yeah, like, there's nothing much to talk about that one. That one's seconds, right? Like, when you look at the global, it probably is, because it's her 3rd place finish in that.
Yeah. I think people think, though, in that one, right, like, Tia has a near perfect weekend, and then there's a 3rd, and people are like, oh, what went wrong? What did she mess up? Yeah. Or I think more so, like, what did she mess up? Did she get no reps? But from a performance standpoint, I think we had to be pretty happy with that. I think she could take a few seconds off, but it was more credit to Brooke and Haley on that one. Haley just set the pace and didn't hold back. And I think for Brooke, she needed it so badly. She was in the heat before, and she stayed in her lane. It was impressive.
Yeah, I think Tia's paces in the row and everything went really well. I think it was flawless in terms of like there was no mishaps or no reps for sure. But a third place is a phenomenal result, right? Like, and I think that gets shadowed a lot because of all her placings, and I think she was disappointed in the result, but happy with the execution.
Yep.
Considering, I know there was something there that we could have done better in the warm up, and we've spoken about that, but I know she's happy with the execution, not happy with the place, and that was the whole conversation. It's like, look, anyone would love to get a third
Absolutely.
all weekend, right?
Yep.
And like, I say that, and I know she doesn't see herself like that, but I think it's sometimes it can be shadowed by just because of having a number one next to your name a lot. But that was a cool race workout, right? To see the men at the end there, like that, they changed leaders throughout that. You could see the strong rowers like Hopper. He's done a great job. And what was the gentleman's name? What was like fast on his hands, but he was from Mayhem.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
They were like we were
from
seeing
Canada.
Sam.
Sam.
Sam did awesome
Yeah.
all weekend. And that was another thing that was funny in the warm up area all 3 weeks. Was you could see the people that were insanely fast on their hands,
Yep.
but it didn't always shake out that way because the rower did mean so much. So like the programming aspect, I thought it was great, and to see the dudes like because we got spoiled with the Rick J and Bailey race the week before, and it turned out to be the exact same thing on week 3, which was really cool because we got to sit behind their rower monitors and see everybody's paces, and it was just guys kind of trying to light themselves on fire to hang with the dudes next to them because I think they could see their monitors. Funny story about that, actually. I don't know if you even know this, that Jay's judge put the pace boat. He put the pace boat on his monitor.
See, because the judge has the help me sign.
Yeah.
Because they got that international judge sign. And we've seen it a few times. And which is, anyway.
So Bailey could see it, and he was trying to look over at his pace, and all he could see was a pace boat coming across.
Yeah.
But it was cool because, like, it showed who really wanted to, like, dig in on that because there were guys that knew they couldn't hold paces that they were trying to hold but still went for it. So I liked that event a lot. Yeah,
and I think collectively speaking to a lot of the guys around there, most of them they did once, and one or two of the events they practiced once, and some of them they practiced twice. And I think that workout there, everyone at least practiced once.
Yep. Especially week 3, they got so much time.
And then like even still after practicing it, they still didn't they still didn't hold the paces or they wanted to do in training.
Well, I think that happened to Caroline. Like quite honestly, that was her only blemish on the weekend. The only time that we saw her kind of get out of her lane because she got out there and realized how fast people were rowing, and that's just not a big strength for her. And she got herself into a hole to where that girl was holding a 144 to a 145 at the beginning, and if you look at her, you know that's probably not going to end well.
Yeah, she did really well to like stay in her lane towards the end, like when she could only hold on to what she could do. But that was a fun workout. Like I think leading into that, everyone thought there's got to be more to this than a handstand walk. Is there going to be pirouettes? Is there going to be ramps? Are we going to see some form of star jump? We don't know, So like, it was awesome to see just the simplicity in it, and we got races out of it, right? And I think as a spectator, it was really clear to see what they were trying to do. I think that's what I wanted to say. I think some of the confusion and we spoke about this with Tia, it's like when they had the big Syndicate logo.
Yep.
And you had to go to the green line, yellow line, red line. And then you had to stay tight in your lane. And it felt tighter than I wanted to be. It was 4 foot wide is the matting, but the 2-inch
that's thick
tape.
Yep.
Yeah, so it sort of bleeds into your lane by an inch each side. So you're a little bit shorter than 4 feet. Having said that, though, when you're trying to find the green line for the handstand turnaround point, it's all blended in with the white logo and some of the gold crown, and you sort of don't know, is this mat 4 or is this mat 7, or I don't know where I'm at. She said like it didn't really play into anything. It was just more so I didn't know where I was in time and space for that portion. And I think like that bled into like 4 or 5 lanes. But like that was something interesting too. Like we've spoken about or understood that from other events in the past at the games where they've had logos. that you can't really see
Yeah.
in the middle lanes of where you are. But that was just interesting.
Torian had that too because they have the kind of the points in their mats, which is hard because it's just like when you're on your hands, you can't really know what's going on. But what I did notice is their judges did a really good job of staying next to their ear.
Yep.
They told them how many more they had, said what color to go to,
Yeah.
which was good. I think they did a great job on that.
Yeah, the judges did a great job too. They said Tia's judge did a great job of like saying one more, last one, or whatever it was.
Yep.
Okay, what's next?
Snatch. Exciting.
Yeah, that was just awesome to watch again. Again, I think we're just saying awesome a lot here.
Do you like seeing that more than a max lift? Just personally?
I think it allows the athlete to showcase more of their fitness and strength.
Yep.
And I think that's what the test is about. So I do like that element. I think a 1RM fits in here and there.
At the games, probably, right?
I think we like that because from an outsider, there's many ways to skin that, and the concept of going touch and go is like,
Speaking of Colton, that was like, if you guys didn't see that,
Yeah,
that was one of the
cool.
coolest. I've never seen somebody make a rep harder than it needed to be than that rep was.
But
With
like
both plates hitting, and we know how big his hands are. Like, good for that guy.
Yeah,
that's
he
all
crushed
hard
that.
on that one.
Yeah, man. Like I think he was like, it's make or break here, and he just went for it, which is really cool.
We didn't have anybody do it at East, right?
Touch and go?
Yeah.
No, only Guy and
Guy did. Guy's looked silly. Like, he didn't look out of control one time on that workout. That was impressive.
Yeah, and then but Olivia's time was out of this world. I think it gave Brian. I think Brian.
Brian Friend finally had some validation there.
Yeah.
Because she tested that. If you guys, we haven't talked about this yet, in like 4:30, and she shaved 30 seconds or more off that time, which is, it doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, it's crazy to see that her time is like an outlier by a minute. That's
So that was when Dwight came in and told us her time, and I think even us and Jay
show
was
me the
here. We're
video.
like, she must not have squatted.
Did she do?
Somebody changed her
Did she
weights.
do the sixes?
And then we put the video up on the screen, and she changed her own weights. She squatted all of them, and she just kind of flew through it all by herself in her first run.
She was awesome.
That was good.
But at East, for Tia, that went really well.
She was spot on training time.
Yeah. Yeah, she was.
With a longer transition, because she didn't transition that long here.
But she changed. She had to take plates off and put back on.
Yeah.
It was not really like, it wasn't like, within seconds. And that was one of those workouts too. It's like, you try, if you got like a little cushion, there's no point going for that. Like Colton's situation, like, hey, if I do 2 singles, I'm not going to win this. So he made that conscious decision. And I think Tia felt like, hey, I don't need to go there. Like, risk it. Let's be smooth. And again, like, I think that was well executed on her behalf. But I think some of the key takeaways for that one was like to see Haley do so well on that one. Alexis Raptis did phenomenal on that too, which I think a lot of people were like conscious to see how her strength development was going there.
And the Lydia Fish girl, which was just a cool moment. She got to hit those last bars. I don't know her numbers, but I'm assuming that's very close to her 1 rep max, if not at her 1 rep max. So that was cool.
And I think that we saw some earlier heats too, like put up some great times or gave some good perspective of it all too. I wish there was some more nuances or finer details that I could share with that. In the warm-up area, it looked pretty smooth. Everyone had a good gauge of it. I think the warm-up area was very adequate for the amount of 10 athletes to go. But Tia did phenomenally faster than she did in 2016. I think she got like 8:30, so to get 5 minutes. So
I saw a post of, I think it was Jake Berman. He did all 3. So he did regionals, he did West Coast, and he had taken off like 2 minutes on each, which was cool to see.
Yeah, and that's one of those workouts, again, we did once and then just did iterations of it, doing 7, 5, 3, 1 of it or whatever it may be. Because I think that one, as long as you get good touches on the barbell, it's on the floor is the main important thing. I've just been feeling confident going into that one.
And I think a lot of people didn't know how to come out on the first and second bar, which we saw either too hot or too slow. I think Caroline even had a moment to where she got to the last bar and realized, I left too much of the tank on this one with how easy it was. So that was a tough one to gauge. And I think if you're a younger athlete like she is, that's one where back in training, you just have to hammer that stuff a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just trying to think. But yeah, went well. I think the men did a really good job too.
It was a great race down to it. Like, I mean, Hopper was there, Adler was there,
Dallin.
Roman and Dallin. And I saw a moment, I don't know if you saw it because it was just on the floor, where Hopper hit one and then realized the person next to him, I can't remember who it was going back to the bar. So he just said, screw it, I'm going to try to go for a better placing here. Didn't work out, but it's always good to see those things in person.
Yeah, especially because it's event 5 and you don't want to save it for the event 6 to do that. You want to take your risks accordingly. Like, you want to make sure that you're giving yourself.
And I'd rather see
chance.
that, right, than somebody kind of pull back and just lose a spot. So that's good to see in competition.
Yeah. So then event 6.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah. So we going into this, like we knew this would be a good one for Tia. Obviously, we've tested it, and there are good movements for her. Obviously, ring muscle ups are always good for her. But the drama was, so Caroline was in 12th by 6 points. So she needed to beat Erica Folo, who we got to know this weekend a little bit. Didn't know much about her before. She had a great weekend. Obviously, didn't go as she hoped at the very end, but it was good to kind of see her in the early part of the weekend do well. And then Chloe was 20 points even out from her spot.
Yeah.
So 15-ish points around from Caroline as well. And they both came out, executed probably the best that they ever could. And Chloe jumped from 14th to 9th. And then obviously Caroline went to 10th, which was just crazy.
Yeah, that was. And I think in real time, you're seeing some of these things unfold, like, with some of the people getting left behind in that workout, and you're trying to do some quick math in your head, and you're going, man, I have them pretty close in there. But it's really hard. It's not, you don't want to jump the gun and go, hey, you did enough, because you can see the athletes look at you and make eye contact.
Right, when it gets done, they look into the stands, and you just do this.
It's like I want to say yes, but it would kill me if it wasn't the case, So
because even Jeff was doing that with his coach and his wife when they were trying to figure out the math with their fingers. But that, like, I think we talked about it already. That event was an awesome one to end on, just because so much drama happened, and it just depended on, do you want to light yourself on fire here? What bigger risk do you want to take, and if it paid off or not? Yeah,
and I think I'm torn. I think it was a very spectacle event, like from a fan perspective, right? Like to have that as a finisher. But where I'm torn is from an athlete standpoint. Like, it does suck when it comes down to a 3-minute workout to decide your fate, right? And sure, we could look back at the first 5 events, and that's not how the sport is. They want it like we get it, like it's an entertaining sport too at the same time. But it's heartbreaking when you see that these guys have less than 3 minutes to really showcase if they're going to make it or not, and then it comes down to the final event. And a lot of the times these final events have like a machine output for a lady when it's like like it's just not what they want to be. They don't want to see that on a final event for some of these guys, like Follow, it looks like, or a heavy lunge to finish with, right? So sometimes it's like disappointing, like the workout doesn't line up for you. But again, like that comes down to the nature of the sport.
And as great as Caroline's was, we noticed the same thing with Colton on the opposite end the week before. So it's always going to be luck of the draw, it feels like, on that last workout. So I get where that's coming from for sure.
Because it's just tough, and I think that's where my head was at. It's like, almost like had that combination been anything else, Colton would more than likely have qualified.
That's a pretty rough one for him for sure.
So like that's where I think it comes from. It's like, damn, like that's when you just feel for the athletes, because it came down to 3 minutes to decide that. And again, we talked about it, event 1 to 5. Sure, output could have been, circumstances could have been different there, and you wouldn't have to worry about it. But it does come down to the final event, right? It's not over until it is, and that final event dictates whether or not you get a ticket or not.
Yeah, and then unless you're Cole Sager, who you just bank on that.
And then you're happy for someone like Cole Sager, where he has a phenomenal.
And he's done it multiple times.
Yeah.
So it was, what do you think, like going back to Tia, obviously it's a good one for her, but did she do exactly how she did in training? How'd that go on her event there?
Yeah, it was about the same time in training. Like our floor and our pro space is like identical to the floor layout to what we saw at Syndicate or a lot of the semifinals. So we're very fortunate to have an opportunity to like mock the exact same workout. It went really well. I mean this modestly, like she felt like she already had a substantial lead, and it's just more about like, hey, just keeping the foot on the gas. Like we've come this far, 5 events in, just keep just executing to your high output. In the only difference is in training and now is that after her 15th ring muscle up, that transition to picking up the dumbbells was a lot slower on game day than it was in training. When I say a lot slower, I think it's 4 seconds, but for as a fan or someone sitting there going, wait a second, this is twice as long. But she did say the echo felt easier out there than it did in training. So it's like, that's a trade-off. I'll have to watch and see what her splits were off the echo, because I think I was watching Alexis Raptis get off the echo first, and I thought, oh boy, she's going to go for it here.
And she broke.
She did 10 and 5,
right?
So that was interesting. Like I think she's notorious from what I've heard is like a gymnastic stuff. So to see her break at 10.
And I know a lot of people, like this happened to Jay too, when you get on those longer straps and you get excited jumping into the rings, they start swinging a little bit more, and you may have to have some unplanned breaks.
See, I wonder if like people still consider these long straps now. I don't know if they do or not.
I think it depends on the gym, right? Like some gyms only have trawler straps, so it's like those are triple the amount of length. But now, like I think a lot of people do have that same length, which is good. But even with the rig, it does move. Like when you have that many athletes on it, so it's always a factor.
Especially like how fast they're transitioning into them. Like it swings pretty hard for those guys. You can see that with the men where they're having to do that. I was surprised to see, but then again, like no, I retract that. I was going to say I was surprised to see how many men like had to squeeze out their last 1 or 2 reps in the ring muscle ups, but I retract that because a lot of these men did 30 calories in 30 seconds. So like, I apologize.
It's a different game for men.
But I think I was surprised to see how the discrepancy in the lunge from the men like field, like how some found that like very easy or comfortable, and then some found that like to be one of the hardest movements they did all weekend.
Yeah, and it seemed like it was grip more than anything. Like I didn't see anybody's legs really give out. It was more of just like death gripping those dumbbells.
And that was striking. Like that was something that really like hit home of going, oh wow. I don't know if that was just accumulation of the weekend or was literally the last movement, or if that was the echo bike again, just being like completely like doused. And
lactic acid just getting everywhere.
And they're just having to hold on towards the end.
Which I think is tough for women on that one, and why we saw them have to break up the lunges so much more, because it's not like the diameter changes on a dumbbell like it does a barbell. So I think that even for Erica, I mean, she was the first or second one to the dumbbells and didn't finish the workout. And that was like Caroline, she gave us a heart attack because she took 20 seconds to pick up her dumbbells while we're watching it. But she knew, like, if I just take this extra breath, tighten my belt, I can do it unbroken. And it was cool to see that one, especially from a young athlete, because as scared as we were, she sounded confident in what she was doing, which was cool.
What was your favorite event for the weekend? Not necessarily region, but just like event like you thought, like, I want to watch this one.
It wasn't going to be the handstand walk one, and then when I watched Jay and Ricky and Bailey do it, like that was probably one of the coolest events I've ever watched.
Yeah, I think you loved that one. Like, it was really cool to watch that
because you got to see it
all leaders, didn't they?
Yeah, you got to see it all unfold. Yeah. Like, it wasn't like somebody was going to win that the whole time, and Jay wasn't even in the lead until the last row. Yeah, and then his hand went up, and that stadium went wild.
It was pretty crazy.
It was, but like what you just said, like Ricky's holding a 130 in the first round, and I think most people that could see their rowers were like, "Wow, it's over." Like that guy, if he can hold that. Yeah. But it went back and forth, and even talking to Bailey afterwards, he's like, "Man, I knew I couldn't hold this row pace, but I tried as hard as I could." So that was a cool one to see. Yeah,
that was cool. I liked.
I think the best performance for me though, like overall, like just from seeing from a fan standpoint, was Emma Tall. Like in Europe, like she crushed it all weekend. We know about her, but like to see some of the times, her event 6 time and then her legless time were crazy. And like I don't think anyone had picked her for those specifically. Maybe they did in Europe, but I know we didn't have an eye on it. But that was impressive.
Yeah, for sure. Emma did really well on that one. Grace Walton did really well on that row one.
That handstand wall. Yeah, her paces on the row were
phenomenal.
Like 144, 145.
Justin's performance overall, like it's great to see him back in shape. Trying trying to think.
Abby in West. So Abby is the girl that Taylor competed against in Mexico 2 years ago, I think, and she was pretty new to the sport, but you could tell there was a lot there.
Yeah.
And she won, which I don't think a lot of people picked either, and she was just solid all weekend. She's a taller, bigger athlete, so the machines played well, and I think she's finally getting some strength in her, which she should do well at the games, especially with more running if it's involved.
Yeah, and I think probably the last 5 minutes we'll probably talk about like some of the details of the workout or programming there. It was intriguing to see the Echo show up twice, for sure.
Which we saw last year too.
Yeah, strangely enough. And see a rower, so we saw 3 machines and 6 of the tests.
Yeah, which was good though, because I don't think it was machine bias. Like, I think we've had events in the past that were like, if you're good, like last year, if you were a 200+ pound man and you were 6 foot tall, you probably were going to make the games, which we did not enjoy watching because it was all biased towards them. I don't think, even though it was enough machines in this, I think you still saw a good range of different body types, and that just comes down to fitness, but that's at least what I noticed.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that was just striking to see that play out the way it did. I think the rope climbs on paper, I think everyone thought, oh, okay, legless rope climb workout. Yeah. You beauty, I love it, or oh, dang, I don't like it. But it never ended up being like, I mean, it was a huge factor for the women, but I don't think it was like the be end and end all. Like,
so would you rather that event be what it was for the women, or would you rather see it harder for the men in some way?
Probably harder for the men in some way.
Okay. What would you do?
Yeah, I think I thought about this. You probably have to slightly change the format of the workout. And I think we could skin that in many ways.
Do you think it's
probably the most interesting piece of that whole workout was probably the step down on the box?
Yeah,
I get it from a safety conscious point of view, but stepping down 30 inches, I tried to demo that the other day.
And then you think Colton's got to do it.
and I know, and I think that's a part of me going, dang, like we're really testing his like physical limitations there. And he'd never admit it because that guy he sees himself like he never makes excuses for himself.
And if you didn't see it, he already built himself a wooden box, which is even more dangerous in the same specs.
Yeah. So like that was probably the most interesting movement, but like I understand it from a safety conscious perspective. I mean, like maybe like just 24-inch and a 20-inch box and just up the reps a little bit.
Were there burpees?
No,
so like even a burpee box jump over on that, like you could even talk about that a little bit because you can bring the height down a little bit. But we could always say something else can change. So that was interesting. Do you see a world where...
And I did like running outside as opposed to the runners.
I agree.
I know there's some form of debate there where but it's inconsistent. But you do actually have that on the runners. Like we have 6 runners outside. We
saw that, yep.
And we have discrepancy within the 6, and they're all manufactured on the same hour, I'd imagine, right? Like because we got them. So what I'm trying to say is like even with the Salt runners or the other brands that may have appeared for the runners, there's still discrepancy in that. You've seen that in the past. But at least with the running component on outside or just actually running.
Yeah. Especially because it's always at the games.
Yeah.
Like I think that workout last year, the longer event, was it event 1 with the sled? Yep. Obviously the sled was a mess, but like even the runners there, it favors the bigger athlete. You can pull harder on it with your hamstrings. Like it was good to see who, for us, at least data wise, who did well in event 1 this year is going to be probably a good runner on events when it comes to the games too.
Yeah. And I think the evolution from quarterfinals to semifinals tests certainly stepped up. And then we worked more on capacity, which you could see that coming through. And that's, again, for me, that's the bones of CrossFit, of what we're trying to do, find the fittest on earth. So that was awesome to see the evolution in the programming there. So the guys did a great job of that.
I think overall we had probably, I don't know what the percentage would be, but way less injuries this year. Like there was a lot last year with some of the movements like the ruck and things like that. I think going back to just the pure fitness of things helped a lot of people. And obviously that's the number one thing we want always is no injuries. I think I only knew of 1 or 2, which you never want to see them, but obviously it's good to see there was less. Yeah,
and I think in terms of testing, I think I had a question come up in the DMs about this of like, oh, how much should we test these workouts? And I touched on it throughout this, but for the most part we did them once. And around the European time, because they announced it so early.
Yeah.
And I tried to reserve Tia from doing it the weekend they announced them. So we did them once, tried to follow the format of what they did. So I think what we anyway, we tried to follow the same format as what they would do, event 1, 2, and then after that, we then tried to finish off the program that I had already, and I just made some tweaks that the combinations of what we might see at semifinals. So for instance, I had some box jumps and step downs, and more legless rope climbs because I had rock rope climbs, and then just made small tweaks like that. And then when Australia was going, so that would have been week 2, we did some like retesting of the 1 or 2 that she wanted to do again, and that was event 2, and then and event 6, and then we just did micro versions of
like intervals on things.
Yeah, and just like the rowing paces and trying to do the handstand ski work and just trying to really tax that, because that time, man, like it's so valuable for a high level athlete who's like very strongly going to the games, not just to waste that downtime, but to utilize that time to get some more touches, because week 1 are back into full swing training right now. At least Tia got some good touches on some heavy dumbbells and whatever it may be, some ruck runs, while they're doing that right now, and then Tia's having those few days down. Another question I had is like, how long will Tia have off now? So depending on what week she is for the semifinals, but for now, we're going to go back into the gym on Thursday, do some form of like light active interval, like EMOM, and then gradually pick it up. And then you could bet your bottom dollar Monday or Tuesday, we're going to be back into full swing. What that looks like in preparation, I'm going to have to roll back the manual a few years and see what we did in 2022, and then just try up the ante in a few of those things. But because the sport, I feel like, has shifted more to capacity, I think I'm going to roll back a few more pages and go back to what we did in 2020.
Which is great.
And I've got some phenomenal data there with a lot of the testing and what we can do to like see or how she was performing there. And then
I think a point to make on that, it's wildly different for everybody, right? Because like Tia can almost train a little bit for the games in her semifinals prep because she has to. Caroline and some of the younger athletes, they have to be all in on this. So they're going to test things some more. So when you guys are thinking about that, like it's not a one size fits all, which is what's so nice about having all the coaches that we have here, because they're not following the same programming. So I think that's a big point when you guys are thinking about those things. I think it's nice this year. This is the longest time we have between semis and the games that we've had in years. So even if you are somebody that really has to test all these workouts 5 times, get after it, and hope to qualify, they at least have enough time now to get after it for the games.
Yeah, I think collectively, from hearing from week 1 to week 3, most people just tested them once or twice or whatever they may have done there. So I don't think when you are comparing week 1 to week 3, like, sure, they did get some great data points understanding strategy-wise. And I'm sure that helped a lot of week 3 for sure. But like, you're talking seconds here because they're so fit. You're not going to, like, week 1 and week 2, they're so fit. You're not going to see like dramatic times unless it's their wheelhouse workouts. But I did have a question too. We had someone reached out, hey, I'm a semifinals athlete, obviously didn't make the games. What should I do now? That's quite hard to answer broadly speaking, but collectively I'd be looking at your results. I'd be taking some downtime. Look at your results, see where you fell short relative to the pack. Try break down why that was the case. If you're lucky enough and you are on tape or you have recordings of yourself performing those workouts, I'd certainly watch that. And then understand the areas that you need to improve on. Use the Open, use the quarterfinals, and then use your semifinals data to find out where you are relative to this point. Looks like a great chance now to enhance your strength or like work on some of those things that take a lot of time to like get monumentally better. Like for instance, like adding 20 pounds to your back squat or wherever it may be. Or if running is like a big downfall, and I think that was sort of some of the outline, the data. Obviously working towards that. And then obviously like we've got like tracks now that we're going to be leaning into the next season. So like
all of our tracks will be the off-season cycle coming up in 2 weeks, and we're in one right now as well. And I think we've had so many inquiries about one-on-one coaching now.
It's cool
because people realize, hey, if I really want to take the next step, whether it be quarterfinals to semifinals or semifinals to the games, maybe I need to work with someone one-on-one every single day, which is like now that we have Joey and Tim and Dave, they are crushing it. And it's like we got to cut their inboxes short sometimes, but these guys put in so much effort, and the amount of feedback I even got at Tori and Tim's got really two good athletes that like they performed better than they have their whole careers within such a short amount of time that you can see the difference it makes when you work with those guys. So that's always a great option as well. And then I think even looking from a competitive advantage standpoint, like I think a good example is Garrett that we worked with for the first time, Garrett Clark this year, and he was one of our new athletes with Coach Dave, and he even came to us and said, hey, I'm not performing the way that I think I can for what my ability is as an athlete. Like I do great in the open, I do great in quarterfinals, but I get to an in-person competition and it just kind of falls apart for me because I don't know my nutrition and my diet and salt and electrolytes, all the things that come into play, like you said, at West Coast with the sun, to where those guys can help so much on that aspect. And even just asking us questions, I think those little things can take you to the next level.
Yeah, for sure. But I think
that's good. That was a pretty good recap there. What do we got just to give the people what's coming up for us next?
Yeah, so we've got all our proven athletes that are going to the games. We're going to try to do a big training camp there.
Yep. Bring the Aussies back.
Yep, they're coming out hopefully around July. But I think what's great is that we've got this great roadmap now that we're going to utilize this time, work closer with these guys. In fact, we've had some athletes reach out who made the games and want to expand and have conversations with us. So we're very pleased to have that. And
for sure.
I think you had a meeting this morning, which is awesome.
Yep.
But I think this time now is the exciting time for coaches. This is like when you've watched the sport long enough, this is the moments that you want to be involved in.
For sure.
And you understand that hey, this has a dramatic impact on their performance, and this is like the butterflies as a coach that you want to do and you want to geek out and all that stuff. So I use this time now to really pave the map or the road, if it's here. But what I will do first, I get all the data points of what I've seen other regions do, see where she is collectively to her previous self with some of the testing that we do, do some testing now. And when I say testing, it's actually quite mild. It's just more about some workouts that we've done previous years, not like a 10-minute watt test or anything like that. That'll probably come in a few weeks. But right now, it's just more gauge and seeing where she is with some of these workouts that we've done prior. Great, and then we'll start enhancing and building off that. We'll start introducing more outdoor stuff, swims, making sure that we start bringing out the yoke again, sled pulls, implementing a lot more of those odd objects. And then accumulating more volume over the weeks because we could assume 14 workouts like we typically do. So making sure that we gradually increase. Obviously some tapers, some deload weeks thrown in there. So I think right now I'm trying to finish that off by today, by week 5 and then week 8. Week 5. And then I think week 7 we're just going to have a micro deload, and then we're going to have a taper at the end of that. But guys, if you've got any questions related to any of this stuff, please just reach out to myself or Nick or put in the comments below. I think this is just a big dump of information or just our experiences. I think the next podcast we want to do is with Tia when she gets back.
Yep.
But again, from Nick and I, we appreciate you guys supporting us all throughout the semifinals, throughout the whole year. It means a lot that you guys are tuning in. So if you did like this, obviously
subscribe, follow all the good stuff. Let's do another for all of you who listen this whole time. We'll do another giveaway here we did before. Drop what should they comment down below? Drop Tia below and we'll hook you guys up. First 20 people we'll hook you up with an ebook of some kind.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. We did it. Episode 8 out.